The transmission came during a routine patrol. Captain Rennick of the Krell Dominion's Border Division leaned back in his command chair, yawning as his crew scanned the blank, empty corner of the Orthus sector, a remote and useless stretch of stars no one had ever cared about. That night, though, the silence was broken. "Unregistered vessel entering grid 3-5, barked Officer Dren, his long gray fingers tapping across the glass console. "No transponder. Trajectory linear, slow, deliberate." Rennick barely looked up. "Another pirate?" he muttered. "Scramble a response drone. Standard hails. If they run, disable." No response to hails. Still approaching. That made him pause. Most ships ran or begged. This one did neither. He leaned forward. Visual. The screen blinked. Then stabilized, showing a gray, jagged-looking vessel shaped like nothing the Dominion had ever catalogued. Not sleek, not beautiful, just functional. Thick armor plates, no glowing cores, no insignia, no fear. Rennick narrowed his eyes. "Patch me through to Central Command. Priority level red." Before the channel could open, the human ship halted, mid-space, with impossible precision. No drift, no wobble, no movement. It just waited. The Galactic Dominion had existed for over 12,000 cycles. It had consumed hundreds of species, some through diplomacy, most through fire. Their power was not in empathy, but dominance, assimilation through fear. They had seen rebellions, uprisings, full planetary purges, but nothing quite like this. In the following days, more human ships arrived. Not in fleets, but in singles, small vessels, quiet, no weapons armed. They lingered at key borders, watched, then slowly retreated, only to return again, farther in. It was deliberate, like probes, like predators learning the habits of prey. Admiral Vorak, an old, grizzled tyrant of the outer sectors, called it nonsense. "Scouts from a pre-warp civilization, nothing more," he growled at a council briefing. "Crush them and move on." So they did. 3 cruisers were dispatched. Only one came back. It didn't speak. The crew was alive, but broken, eyes vacant, jaws trembling, not a scar on their bodies. The ship's logs were blank. No data, no answers. Just a final message transmitted before the encounter. They just sat there. Across the galaxy, the name human began surfacing like an itch under the skin. They had no centralized planet recorded, no official language, no culture, and yet patterns were emerging. Trade anomalies, vanishing science outposts, silent beacons, disrupted wormhole lanes. When the Dominion finally captured one, after cornering a lone ship in the Varelian belt, they expected a fight. Instead, they found a man. No armor, no weapons, just standing alone inside the dim metallic ship. Waiting. They took him without resistance, brought him before the council. Dozens of warlords, scholars, and political elites filled the hall. The human said nothing. Didn't flinch. Didn't sweat. He was placed in an interrogation room. 3 torturers entered. An hour later, 2 came out vomiting. The 3rd was dead. No wounds. Just a face locked in horror. Surveillance showed the human hadn't moved. No strikes, no weapons. He just sat still. Staring. Within cycles, something shifted in the air of the Dominion. Empires ran on fear, but this fear didn't come from violence. It came from absence. Absence of motive, of threat, of demand. The humans didn't ask for land, or treaties, or surrender. They simply appeared. They watched. And when provoked, they didn't attack. They vanished. And something always went wrong in the system they left behind. Engines malfunctioned, AI systems crashed, entire food supplies spoiled in hours. No one ever saw them do anything, but every time, the outcome was the same. Silence, ruin, collapse. General Talvek, a ruthless war hero, tried to rally strength. "We are the Dominion. They are animals drifting out of their cages. We will make them kneel." He launched a full strike fleet of 400 ships toward Sol 3, the supposed origin of the humans. Only 12 ships returned, and the admiral in charge came back, blind, no damage, no physical trauma. He just stared, trembling, whispering the same thing again and again. The stars screamed. Then they went quiet. The galaxy began whispering a new fear, not of war, but of the quiet ones. Not the conquerors, but the witnesses. The ones who didn't fight, because they knew they didn't need to, and as their silent ships now orbited dozens of core worlds just out of reach, watching, the Dominion finally realized. Maybe humans weren't calm because they were peaceful. Maybe they were calm because it was already over. It had been 2 standard months since the incident in the Varelian Belt. 2 months since a single human had been captured and brought into the heart of the Dominion. And still, no one knew what he was. The man hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, hadn't spoken a single word. He sat in his containment cell, staring at the wall like time didn't mean anything to him. He showed no sign of pain, boredom, or fatigue. The Dominion's top medics confirmed his vitals were steady. His organs showed perfect function, but his brain activity. "Flat in some regions, hyperactive in others," reported Chief Neurospec Soar. "There's no pattern, no baseline. It's not normal. It's not even sentient the way we understand it." "Is he drugged?" asked Admiral Vek, the head of Galactic Surveillance. His 3 eyes blinked in unison, nervous. "No. We've tested everything. No chemicals, no neural implants, no genetic anomalies." Vek turned to the holoscreen. The human still hadn't moved. He'd been sitting like that for 63 days. Not a twitch, not a blink. And somehow, the entire galactic Dominion was more afraid of that man than the fleets surrounding Sol. They called him the Passenger. Not because he gave a name. He didn't. But because when they first found him, he had no command console in his ship. No weapons, no navigational seat. He was just sitting. Alone. In a steel box, drifting thousands of kilometers through deep space, like he was waiting for someone to catch him. The strange thing was, his vessel had no propulsion signature. It hadn't used fuel. It hadn't jumped via standard warp lanes. It had just been there, and that terrified the Dominion more than anything. Technology could be fought. Weapons could be countered. But this was something else. A high council meeting was called on Tyrinth Prime. 23 of the most powerful figures in the galaxy gathered in the sky chamber, a hovering structure wrapped in transparent alloy that gave a full panoramic view of the stars above. Each one had seen war. Each had ordered genocide, executed rebellions, and conquered systems. But now, they sat silent. Vek broke it first. "They don't behave like an empire." "They have no demand," said another, one of the reptilian First Corps ministers. "No political doctrine. No spokesperson." "They didn't even respond when we destroyed one of their ships last week," another added. "They just left." "Maybe that's the message," whispered a voice at the edge of the table. All heads turned. It was Commander Draven, an old, scarred humanologist, one of the few Dominion-born officials who had studied Earth-based life forms for decades before contact. He was considered fringe, paranoid, obsessive. Now he looked vindicated and horrified. "They're not negotiating," Draven said. "They're watching." "Watching what?" asked Vek. "Us, how we react, how we fall apart. Every time we strike, they record. Every time we interrogate, they observe. They're mapping us, not for diplomacy, but for something else." "Pre-invasion?" Vek offered. Draven shook his head. No. That's what makes them terrifying. Then what? A warlord snapped. If not conquest, then what do they want? Draven looked up, and in a voice filled with something very close to dread, he answered, Closure. The human in the cell moved. It happened so fast the guards didn't have time to react. One blink, one instant, and he was standing. No sound, no transition, just sitting, then standing. The lights in the observation wing dimmed. One of the guards dropped his rifle and vomited. The other began murmuring nonsense about stars collapsing. Security bots initiated countermeasures, but their systems crashed before they could lift a weapon. Inside the cell, the human tilted his head and stared straight into the one-way mirror. He couldn't possibly see through it. And yet he did. Vec, who was watching remotely from the capital, froze in place as the human lifted a hand and tapped once on the glass. Tap! That was it. No words, just the softest tap. And across 5 sectors, Dominion communication relays went dark for 0.7 seconds, just long enough to crash every surveillance AI running in the outer systems. It wasn't coincidence, it was control. They tried to move him after that. 3 elite guards in exoframes entered the cell with stun batons and molecular chains. Only one came out. She was bleeding from her eyes and kept whispering, "We're not the apex. We're not the apex," again and again until medical sedation finally put her under. They checked the footage. It showed the human lifting his head, once, and then nothing. The feed cut for exactly 6.6 seconds. When it returned, 2 of the guards were slumped on the floor, and the third was curled in the corner, whispering. No marks on him, no signs of struggle, just that same blank expression. The human was moved to a floating observation station, entirely remote, automated, orbiting a dead star. Still he waited. Still he didn't speak. But this time, he looked up, right into the station's external camera, and smiled. A cold, calculated, emotionless smile. Vec issued the order. Lock down all borders. No vessel enters or exits Dominion territory unless cleared and scanned. But it was too late. Human ships were already inside. Not many, not armed, just present. Some in orbit, some drifting in trade lanes. One even parked outside the Dominion capital. No weapons, no message. Just watching. And somehow, that presence carried more weight than any invasion. Draven submitted a final report to the Council. It was ignored. So he sent it to the Dominion archives under an untraceable entry. He titled it simply, "They Don't Want Peace." The opening paragraph read, "We assumed war. We assumed negotiation. We assumed expansion or desperation. But humans operate on a different clock. They don't rush. They don't panic. Because somewhere, deep in their history, something broke them so completely that they learned to survive by becoming emptier than fear itself. They don't react to violence. They absorb it. They don't retaliate. They disappear. But not before leaving something behind, a silence, a pattern, a consequence. And now, we're all within that consequence." The passenger finally spoke on day 81. One word, one language no translator AI could fully decode, but every species in the room understood it. It echoed across the surveillance room like a whisper inside the bones. The single word, observe. That was it, but its effect spread faster than any weapon. The meaning hit like a virus, infecting minds with raw comprehension. Observe, as in, you're not the one studying us. As in, you're the test subject now. As in, your empire was the experiment from the beginning. High Chancellor Meneth, Supreme Voice of the Dominion, sent a direct communication to the Terran frequency. The first official message. "What is your objective?" The reply came instantly. It was just a video. A human city, ruined and abandoned. Earth's skyline, cracked and overgrown, no citizens, no movement, just decaying history. Text followed. "This is what we did to ourselves. Now, it's your turn." Panic gripped the Dominion. Citizens whispered of ghost fleets. Stories spread of stars dimming without cause, of AI-controlled colonies reporting human sightings in places no human ships had ever traveled. Military leaders began deserting posts. Entire sectors went dark voluntarily to avoid being seen. The fear wasn't about what humans could do. It was about the fact that they didn't have to. They weren't invading. They were waiting. Vec called for emergency protocol. He ordered the passenger terminated. He never got the chance. The moment the execution order was confirmed, the observation station simply vanished. No explosion, no energy reading, no debris. Gone. No trace. And then, over every galactic channel, a message echoed. Only once. "You studied our weapons. You studied our wars. But you never studied our patience." The passenger reappeared days later. On Earth, standing alone on the balcony of a ruined human parliament tower, looking up at the dead sky. The Dominion tried to scan the planet, but their satellites failed. Every probe burned up on entry. Every signal jammed. Earth had shut itself off. But the passenger kept standing there, waiting. And so the Dominion waited too, terrified of what would come next, not from violence, but from silence, because they realized, too late, war is loud, easy to understand, easy to fight. But the calm? The calm is the part where you realize you're already inside the cage. They started tearing each other apart before a single human weapon was fired. 3 major Dominion sectors declared independence within the same cycle. Military governors seized control of supply routes, demanding protection from the Watchers in the Dark. Propaganda flooded the streets. If the humans don't kill you, your neighbor will. Massive exoduses began from the outer sectors. Civilians scrambled into illegal transports, fleeing toward the inner core. Whole planets were abandoned in panic, leaving machines to tend the soil, factories running with no orders, and dead cities humming with the eerie echo of ghost transmissions. In Sector 14, a popular holo show actor was executed for dressing like a human. In Sector 3, Dominion loyalists shot down one of their own cruisers, convinced it had been hacked by the Terrans. The humans didn't speak, didn't retaliate. They just let the fear spread like fire in dry grass. Commander Draven, now branded a sympathizer by the High Command, had gone into hiding. He lived in the underbelly of an old transport bay, deep beneath the crust of Etherian, a mining moon no one cared about anymore. He hadn't slept in 3 days. His hands trembled as he adjusted the manual signal booster, an outdated analog relic. He didn't trust Dominion networks anymore. They were corrupted, infected not by code, but by doubt. He recorded a new log, this time not for the Council, but for anyone who might listen once he disappeared. The collapse is internal. The humans don't need to invade because they've already turned our greatest weapon, our fear, against us. We were built on dominance, on compliance. Once that cracks, everything else falls. I don't think the humans want our territory. I think they want us to watch ourselves fall apart the same way they did. He paused, then whispered, "What did they do to themselves?" No answer came. Only the low hum of a broken empire collapsing under the weight of its own reflection. The passenger reappeared again, this time not in person, but through every screen in the Dominion, every feed, every broadcast, every personal communicator. He didn't say a word. He just looked into the camera for exactly 13 seconds. No background, no context, no message, just that face, emotionless. Still, staring. When the screens returned to normal, hundreds of Dominion citizens across dozens of worlds had collapsed. Seizures, psychological breaks, or complete silence. They called it the mirror pulse. Neurologists tried to explain it away as subliminal audio triggers. Military tacticians claimed it was psychological warfare. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. They had seen something in his eyes, something they weren't supposed to see, something that made everything else meaningless. Back on Earth, the cities remained quiet. Ruins overtaken by nature, skyscrapers cracking, streets filled with dust and vines. But if you looked closely, very closely, there were signs. Flickers of movement inside buildings, machines quietly operating with no power source. A train gliding on rusted rails, with no passengers, no crew. And in the distance, past the jagged bones of collapsed bridges, stood other humans. Not many. Never close, just far enough to see, just long enough to let you know, we're still here. We've always been here. They never spoke, they never waved, but they watched, and when Dominion spy drones got too close, they simply vanished. Not cloaked, gone, like they were never there. Vec, now losing control of the core, turned to desperation. He ordered the assembly of Project Spearhead, an experimental neural weapon designed to hijack Terran brain patterns and overload them with artificial dreams. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was an attack on consciousness itself. If we can't kill them with force, we kill their minds, Vec growled, his voice raw, his skin pale from sleepless cycles. If they won't speak, we make them scream. The weapon was fired toward Earth from a secure orbital station. Thousands of modified dreams beamed directly into the planet's surface. Painful simulations, violent hallucinations, sensory overloads engineered by Dominion psychologists. For 3 days, the planet went quiet. Even the animals, even the wind. And then, Earth answered, not with weapons, not with death, but with a dream. One sent back across the same neural link. Just one. The Dominion station received the signal and played it on the main screen. It showed a Dominion general standing in the ruins of his own palace, sobbing, surrounded by the charred corpses of everyone he'd ever loved. Then a voice spoke, not loud, not angry, just calm and dead. This is what you'll become, not because of us, but because of you. The crew of the station self-terminated within the hour. On the outskirts of Dominion space, a trader named Bren Holtz, a man who had lived through 5 planetary wars and survived a black market organ trade, reported seeing a human vessel hover above a dying star. He approached it cautiously. The ship was silent. Lights off, no engines. He hailed them once, twice. Nothing. Then his system detected something strange, a playback loop from the human ship. It wasn't words, it was laughter, human laughter, not joyful, not deranged, just quiet, low, and tired. Holtz, not easily shaken, dumped his entire cargo and left the sector. He told no one at first, but later. When questioned under stress, he finally confessed, "They're not trying to scare us. They're not playing a game. They're just done, and they want us to see what being done looks like." By now, the Dominion had lost contact with over 40 colonies. Not attacked, not bombed, just lost. No comms, no signals, no power, and yet every probe sent to investigate showed no signs of damage, no human presence, nothing. But in every data packet recovered, there was always one strange anomaly, a sound loop buried in the final logs, a soft voice whispering over and over, "You were never meant to last." Admiral Korvek, the last living member of the once mighty Varelian fleet, made a final stand in the Pathar cluster. He gathered what ships he could, fortified the system. and prepared for the human invasion. Nothing came. For weeks, they waited, weapons primed, sleep abandoned. Then the stars began to shift, subtly. One by one, constellations changed shape, not dramatically, but just enough to notice. Like the universe itself was rewriting the sky. His crew went mad within days. Some stared out the windows until their eyes bled. Others tried to kill themselves quietly. Korvek was found curled in his quarters, whispering, "They're not attacking us. They're unmaking the rules we live by." On Earth, something stirred. The passenger had left the ruins. He now walked alone through the ash-covered fields outside the capital zone. No armor, no weapon, just a worn-out coat and boots caked in dust. Behind him, others followed. More humans, men, women, even children. But they didn't speak. They didn't need to, because every Dominion scanner that locked onto them simply returned one word: witness. The Terrans weren't the threat. They were the reminder, a warning written in flesh and silence, a message that echoed louder than war. This is what happens when you build everything on fear. This is what happens when you forget what suffering feels like. This is what happens when you lose your soul and think your throne will save you. Back in the Dominion capital, Vec sat alone in the Grand Command Hall. The council was gone. No one had come to work in days. The power flickered. The sky above the dome had turned black. Not dark. Black. A void where stars should have been, and then, on every wall, across every screen, across every broadcast system, the passenger's face. One last time. He said nothing. He didn't need to, because in the final moments, Vec finally understood. The humans didn't survive because they were stronger. They survived because they accepted death. They looked into the abyss, let it inside, and didn't flinch. And now, they were the abyss. The Dominion didn't fall in battle. It fell in silence. It unraveled from the inside out, choked by its own arrogance and the creeping realization that its gods had never existed, only ghosts wearing skin. Humanity didn't win. They didn't need to, because winning was a concept for empires. And humanity? Humanity had moved on from such things long ago. The Dominion was no longer an empire. It was a carcass, a breathing, twitching body that hadn't realized it was already dead. On the surface, government structures still stood. Fleets still floated. Bureaucrats still sent orders across fractured systems. But underneath, chaos, paranoia, abandonment, and the haunting sense that someone, something, was always watching. Trade routes had gone silent. Entire populations vanished without a trace. Communication networks were severed not by human interference, but by internal collapse. The machines turned on themselves. AI matrices self-sabotaged. Starports launched themselves into black space with no navigation, their crews screaming as they disappeared into nothing. Not a single human touched them. They didn't need to. They were past violence now. Commander Draven resurfaced after 2 months in hiding. No longer part of the Dominion, he was just a man among survivors, wandering between broken colonies and refugee ships. People whispered his name like he was cursed. He wasn't a soldier anymore, just a man trying to find answers before the dark took them all. He boarded a cargo freighter headed toward the outer veil, a forgotten edge of space where the Dominion had long ago built deep science stations. Most had been left to rot when the war ended. Now maybe they held something untouched, something that hadn't been watched. The pilot didn't ask questions. No one did anymore. Everyone just moved, quiet, hollow-eyed, like ghosts pretending to still be alive. Station Vacal 19 floated above the cracked planet of Illirath. Draven stepped onto its surface, wearing old armor stitched together with civilian patches. He moved through long, dead corridors filled with flickering lights and echoing groans from pipes and loose plating. The station was empty, no signs of human presence. But they had been here. He could feel it. He found the lab. Dust-covered consoles blinked faintly in the dark. He powered one up, surprised it even worked. The logs were corrupted, files partially erased, fragmented, except one. A single recording remained intact. It was dated 87 Dominion cycles ago, long before first contact. Draven played it. A woman's voice spoke in a clear, calm tone. "We made contact, not with humans, not yet, but with what came before them. They were silent too, still, observers. Waiting for someone else to reach their level of ruin. I think they chose humanity. I think they gave them something we were never meant to have. A kind of patience that bends time. The humans didn't build that calm. They inherited it." The video cut off with static. Draven leaned back in his chair. It wasn't humanity that the Dominion feared. It was the thing behind them, the legacy, the scar passed down from one broken species to another, like a virus. Meanwhile, Earth changed again. Satellites sent back new images. Cities that were once overgrown and silent had shifted. Buildings realigned, streets smoothed. Lights, soft and golden, now flickered through cracked windows. Someone, or something, was rebuilding. Not fast, not methodical, just naturally, quietly. Like plants growing between stone. The Dominion called in a stealth cruiser to investigate from orbit. It never made it back. Its final broadcast was a single sentence, spoken by the AI navigator in a flat, childlike voice. "We are not dead, we are just done speaking." Back in the Dominion core, what remained of leadership had splintered into three factions. 1. The Purifiers, fanatics who believed humanity was a test sent by the stars. Their solution? Cleanse all remnants of sentient life until only pure logic remained. They began sterilizing outer worlds in secret. The Absorbers, former scientists and tech elites who believed humanity could be reverse-engineered. They built grotesque human-machine hybrids using scraped Terran DNA and Dominion biology. None survived more than a week. Most begged for death within hours. The drifters, defectors, deserters, and diplomats who accepted that humanity couldn't be beaten. They didn't worship humans. They pitied them. They scattered, trying to preserve what little culture remained in forgotten corners of the galaxy. And then there were the rest, those who simply stopped caring. Draven, haunted by the message from Vakal 19, began a descent into what was left of Dominion intelligence archives. What he found changed everything. Buried beneath a mountain of redacted files and wiped black boxes was a report dated 240 cycles before the first official Terran contact. It was labeled Project Lazarus, Pre-Contact Human Exposure. Inside were images, dozens of them, of a Terran ship discovered on the edge of the galaxy nearly 2 centuries before the passenger appeared. It was wrecked, no power, drifting without purpose. Inside were 8 human corpses. Dead. Burned. But every single body had one thing in common. They were all smiling. Wide, peaceful, as if whatever killed them had brought relief, not pain. And scribbled across the interior of the ship, burned into the walls in dozens of languages, some ancient, some untranslatable, was one repeating phrase: "They gave us peace the way fire gives light." So Draven changed course. He left Illirath, left the Dominion. He went to Earth, not to fight, not to ask, but to understand. His arrival wasn't greeted with violence. No ships approached. No warnings were issued. He landed in what was once New Chicago, now a twisted forest of steel and glass. He stepped out, rifle in hand, expecting anything, hoping for something. But nothing came. Just silence. And then, faintly, music, a piano. Old, slightly off tune, coming from a ruined theater surrounded by rusted vehicles and creeping vines. Draven followed the sound, heart hammering. Inside the theater sat an old man, Terran by appearance, playing a broken piano with a calmness that made Draven's throat go dry. The man looked up, not surprised, not hostile. "You're late," he said. Draven raised his weapon. "What are you?" The man smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just tired. "We were you. A long time ago." Draven's hand tightened on the rifle. "What happened?" The man stopped playing. His fingers hovered over the keys. Then he said, "We believed too much, in growth, in conquest, in the idea that fear could be controlled, until one day the fear got tired of being used and made a choice." Draven frowned. "Fear made a choice?" The man nodded. "To become silence, to stop reacting, to stop playing the game. We didn't win. We just outlasted the lies. And once you do that, you become something worse than a threat. You become a mirror." Draven sat down, his weapon lowered. The man resumed playing. Notes echoed through the shattered theater like lullabies for a dead world. And then the old man said one last thing. "We're not here to punish you. We're here so you can see what you're becoming." Meanwhile, far across the stars, on the remnants of the Dominion capital, Vec sat alone in the throne room. His empire gone, his fleets vanished, his people scattered. He stared into the blackness above, where the stars used to be. And for the first time in his life, he whispered a prayer. Not to gods, not to ancestors, but to the very thing he had feared most. "If you're still watching, please stop." No answer came, only the feeling of being watched and the sound of soft, distant laughter growing closer. Draven stayed in the theater long after the old man stopped playing. The notes still echoed in his mind, looping in silence. Not because of the melody, but because of the way it made the dust in the room stop moving. Like even time paused to listen, like the universe itself remembered something it didn't want to. The old man stood and left without another word. Draven didn't follow. He sat there for hours, maybe days, unsure. The darkness outside didn't shift. The sky above Earth had changed. Stars once known were gone, replaced by unfamiliar constellations that didn't match Dominion charts. And the more he stared at them, the more he realized. They weren't stars. They were ships. Dozens, hundreds, thousands, not human, not Dominion. Just watching, like spectators in a coliseum, waiting for the final act. Draven finally moved when hunger caught up to him. He scavenged what he could. Old ration packs from collapsed military shelters, half-dead water purifiers stuck to cracked walls. Most things still worked. That was the odd part. Earth looked like it died 1,000 years ago, yet nothing had rusted to failure. It was as if the planet had simply agreed to stop. It didn't rot. It didn't scream. It rested. He walked the city for days, saw strange symbols carved into the sides of buildings. Some were mathematical, others entirely human. A few he couldn't decipher at all, curves and loops like alien handwriting trying to mimic emotion. And then he saw them again. People, human shapes in the distance, never close, never together, always still. They didn't wave, didn't speak, just watched him pass. He yelled once, "Who are you?" They didn't respond. One turned, walked into a building and didn't come out again. He wasn't sure they were alive. Or if they had ever stopped being. By the 7th day, Draven found a library, or what was left of one. Collapsed beams, burnt shelves, shattered screens, But deep inside, protected beneath cracked stone and sealed glass, was a single working terminal. It hummed softly, drawing power from some unknown source. He booted it up. The screen flickered. A prompt appeared. "Welcome back. It's been a long time." He froze. "What is this?" "It's not about what. It's about why." Draven typed slowly. "Why did you stop fighting?" There was a pause. Then the response came. "Because fighting is a distraction from the ending we all saw coming. You haven't seen it yet, but you will. Look outside. Really look." He stepped back, walked to the cracked window and stared through it. There was the city. Still and broken. And then he saw it. In the distance, where the skyline met the horizon, something was moving. Not people, not machines, buildings. They were shifting, adjusting themselves like gears in a clock, realigning block by block, structure by structure, as if the entire city were preparing itself. For what? He couldn't tell. But the sound was unmistakable. Silence. Sharpening. He returned to the terminal. Typed again. "What are you preparing for?" The answer came. The final proof. Not of power, not of dominance, but of emptiness. Once you see it, you'll understand why we never needed to win. The terminal shut off. He couldn't turn it back on. That night, he slept beneath the remains of the library roof. And for the first time since arriving on Earth, he dreamed. Not of battles, not of screaming planets. He dreamed of an empty chair in a dark room, a chair facing him, and something sitting in it. Not a person, not a monster, just a presence, waiting. Back in what remained of the Dominion, silence was no longer rare. It was ritual. Entire command sectors had gone quiet voluntarily. Admirals and governors issued pause orders, locking down military protocols and retreating from systems they once ruled. No battles had been fought, no weapons fired, but the Dominion was now only 30% operational. The rest had either gone dark or defected. Factions turned against one another, not for control, but because no one wanted to be the one left last. The ones who resisted didn't get killed. They got watched. And that was worse. Because the human ships didn't come to conquer. They came to observe. And when they lingered too long, systems started to break. Gravity anomalies, biological aging out of sync, quantum clocks misfiring, reality becoming less cooperative. It wasn't technology. It was something else. Presence. Like humanity had become so detached from the rules of existence, they no longer followed them, but bent them just by existing. High Marshal Enver, one of the last active Dominion fleet leaders, ordered a full-scale strike on Earth. He gathered the remnants of the 7th Armada, along with rogue mercenary fleets and unregistered AI weapon systems. Over 2,000 ships converged near the edge of the Sol system. Draven watched them arrive from the roof of a hospital building. Dozens of streaks across the black sky. He whispered to himself, "They're really going to try." And then he heard it behind him. The piano. Again. He turned. The old man had returned. Same coat, same broken keys, same silence. Draven asked, "Are you going to stop them?" The man smiled, just slightly. They've already stopped themselves. The fleet crossed into Sol orbit. No resistance, no movement from Earth, just a cold, dead planet below them. Enver gave the order, "Deploy orbital beacons. We paint this rock with fire and salt." Seconds later, every ship froze, not in space, in time, motionless, engines powered, weapons armed, but absolutely still. Sensors recorded full function. Systems showed no failure. Yet no button could be pushed. No crew could move. Enver stared into the viewer. The stars were gone, replaced by the same face now haunting every Dominion officer. The passenger. He stood not in a ship, not in a station, but in their minds, unblinking, unfeeling, not threatening, just present, like the universe had decided to grow a conscience, and it had chosen the face of a man who had seen too much. Enver tried to speak. No sound came. He tried to move. His hands wouldn't respond. His crew screamed, but no voices escaped, and then without warning the ships began to drift, slowly, backwards, away from Earth. And then, one by one, they vanished, not exploded, not teleported, just erased, as if they had never been real. Draven watched the sky go still again. He turned to the old man. "What are you?" he asked. The old man's smile faded. "For the first time?" He looked tired, exhausted beyond words. "We're the aftermath," he said. "The smoke after the fire, the echo after the scream." He looked up, and Draven followed his gaze. In the sky above, the stars slowly realigned. Not randomly. They were spelling something. He couldn't read it, but he could feel it. A message not meant for minds, but for memories. And deep inside, Draven finally understood. The humans weren't watching because they wanted revenge. They were watching because someone had once watched them fall. And now, it was someone else's turn. The old man stood. "Come," he said. "You should see it." Draven followed him through the dead city, past silent watchers and crumbling towers that hummed softly, as if singing to themselves. They arrived at what once was the heart of Earth's capital, a massive crater surrounded by stone and wire and silence. In the center sat a chair, old, wooden, plain, facing nothing. The man gestured. "Sit." Draven hesitated. "Why?" The old man smiled again. "You've been running from the silence your whole life. It's time you listen." Draven sat. The moment he did, the world changed. The stars fell away. The city vanished. He was alone in a void, and across from him, in another chair, sat the passenger. Not smiling, not scowling, just waiting. And then, the passenger leaned forward and whispered, "Now do you understand why calm is scarier than war?" He sat in that chair, and time lost meaning. Not minutes, not hours, not cycles, just stillness. Draven blinked once, and the world changed. He blinked again, and the passenger was gone. Not vanished, just absorbed into the void around him, as if he had never been a separate thing at all. There were no walls, no floor, just endless black, not cold, not hot. It felt like standing inside memory. Then came the voices. Not from around him, from within. Whispers, chants, laughter, screams, all faint, all fragmented. He clutched the arms of the chair. "What is this?" A voice answered, deep and unfathomable, like a thought trying to disguise itself. "This is what we carried. This is what we became. And this is what you will inherit." Then images surged into his head like a broken dam giving way. He saw Earth. Not the Earth he walked, but one far older, far more raw. Cities burning, skies torn apart by man-made suns, towers collapsing. Families crying out in underground bunkers while nations devoured themselves over lines on maps that no longer existed. He saw children huddled in ash, whispering lullabies to each other while satellites rained like falling stars. Then, silence. No peace agreement, no declaration, just nothing. Humanity, having torn itself to the edge of extinction, simply chose to stop, to let go, to surrender, not to enemies, but to futility. And then, something responded. He saw them. Not gods, not monsters, just presence, observers from outside the known laws, beings that didn't create, didn't destroy, just collected, carriers of entropy, archivists of failure, and they didn't pity humanity, they accepted them. Because, unlike every species that had clawed and screamed and begged for survival, Humans had sat down in the fire and whispered, "We understand now." And in return, the Watchers gave them something no empire could afford. Stillness, not apathy, clarity, a perfect emotional zero point, a virus of calm that no panic could touch, no fear could shake, no war could override. The vision shifted again. Draven saw other species, long extinct, civilizations that had tried to burn hotter, grow faster, consume more, all gone, not by war, by themselves. And behind each one, always too late to understand, had come the humans, not to gloat, not to conquer, just to watch. And now it was the Dominion's turn. Draven snapped awake. The sky above Earth was red. The city around him had crumbled further. Reshaping again, the chair he sat in was now stone. The old man was gone. But someone else stood in his place, a woman, human, young, barefoot in the dirt and glass. She looked at him with sadness, not compassion, not anger, just sadness. Draven stood. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. "I'm the part of you that still thinks this can be fixed." He stepped closer. "Are you real?" "No," she said. "But then again, neither are you, not in the way you think." He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Not from fear. From realization. Back in Dominion space, the final collapse had begun. Entire sectors initiated Scorched Mind Protocol, an ancient failsafe that deleted AI memories and historical archives in case of cultural death. The Dominion didn't want to survive anymore. They wanted to forget. Better to erase themselves than to be remembered as the ones who lost to silence. Whole fleets sent themselves into suns. Leaders retired into underground bunkers and never resurfaced. Those who clung to the old pride either vanished or killed themselves. And through it all, the human ships still drifted, unmoving, unfiring, unblinking, observers, witnesses, archivists of consequence. On Earth, Draven followed the girl through the ruins. She said nothing, but every path they walked showed him more. He saw playgrounds littered with untouched toys. He saw hospitals overgrown but still lit inside. He saw graves that had no names, only symbols burned into stone. Symbols not of death, but of rest. Eventually, they reached the coast. The ocean was black. Not from pollution. From stillness, not a wave, not a breeze, just mirrored glass stretching to a horizon that no longer showed curvature. She pointed. Far in the distance, something rose from the water. It looked like a ship, but not mechanical. It shimmered, changed shape, responded to his thoughts before he had them. "What is that?" he asked. She answered softly, "What comes after understanding?" He didn't resist when the ground shifted beneath his feet and drew him forward. The water didn't wet his skin. It welcomed him like memory. As he stepped onto the deck of the impossible vessel, the girl disappeared. The sky pulsed. And suddenly he was not on Earth anymore. A room formed, white, clean, empty. And across from him sat the passenger once again. This time the man looked younger, his face fuller. His eyes not blank, but knowing. He spoke. "I was you once." Draven's mouth was dry. "What does that mean?" "It means you still think this is about survival, about beating us, about turning the tide, but it never was." "Then what is it about?" Draven asked. The passenger leaned forward. "It's about what happens when you accept that survival isn't the point anymore." Draven shook his head. "Then what is?" "Understanding," he said. "Not peace, not war, just understanding what you were and what you're about to become." He stood, walked to a wall that became a screen. It showed the Dominion capital, empty now, dust blowing through abandoned corridors. A single child walking through the rubble, humming, No soldiers, no machines, just echo. Your empire was a reflection of our past, the passenger said. Violence built from the illusion of control, but control was always a myth. Draven asked, "Why didn't you stop us sooner?" The passenger turned. "Because we couldn't. Not until you were ready. Not until you cracked under your own truth. You weren't destroyed, you arrived." Suddenly, a door opened in the wall. Beyond it, black, not threatening, inviting, a tunnel of thought with no end. Draven hesitated. The passenger waited. Finally, Draven asked the last question that mattered. "Will anyone remember us?" The passenger answered, "Only if you deserve to be." And with that, Draven stepped through. The Dominion died without a final battle, without heroes, without explosions. It ended the same way humanity had. In silence. With watchers, not warriors, with reminders, not monuments, and Earth? Earth remained, not as a warning, not as a trophy, but as a mirror, a place where every empire comes, not to fall, but to see what they truly were all along. He expected light. He expected stars or memory, perhaps some elegant end to explain the passage into the unknown. But Draven's first step through the doorway brought neither peace nor revelation. Only silence. Thick. Unnatural. It wasn't the kind of silence that followed death. It wasn't absence. It was presence. Overwhelming, crushing, complete presence. So loud in its stillness that his breath seemed to offend it. He floated. Or stood. Or maybe just existed. There was no floor. No sky. Just space without stars, weight without mass. Then a voice, not the passenger's, not even human. It was his own, softer, wiser, tired. "This is the final step, Draven. You've carried your species' pride long enough. Now it's time to carry its truth." And with those words, the silence unraveled. A scene emerged, not real, not constructed, just remembered. He stood on a world that wasn't Earth, but resembled it. The air was thick with heat and smoke. The sky was cracked, bleeding light through impossible seams. Below him, war. Not metaphorical. War. He saw Dominion banners flying high, burning, cities collapsing, ships piercing the clouds, tearing across the horizon, and in the middle of it all, humanity, but not fighting, walking. Calm, unarmored, unarmed, just walking through the chaos like it wasn't even happening. Dominion troops opened fire on sight. The humans didn't run, didn't raise hands, didn't even blink. And somehow, the shots missed. Every round curved mid-air, every laser diverted by invisible forces, every assault swallowed by the weight of something unseen. It was like existence refused to let them be harmed. Draven watched as one Dominion general fell to his knees, screaming, clawing at his own chest. He cried, "They're not fighting, they're judging." The humans said nothing. They just kept walking. Then the world shifted again. Now Draven stood in a Dominion classroom, memories replaying like echoes. He saw young cadets being trained, himself among them. Lectures about control, about conquest. Lessons on how empires are built not through fear, but through the illusion that fear can be conquered. One instructor had said, "Power belongs to those who never flinch." And yet, Draven had flinched. Dozens of times. He flinched when they killed innocents to force a system's loyalty. He flinched when he gave the order to sterilize a rebel moon just to send a message. But the worst flinch? When the passenger first looked into the screen. That moment he saw something inhuman, not alien. Something beyond vengeance or cruelty. Stillness. Clarity. Like someone who had burned everything they loved to the ground and finally understood why it had to happen. Another memory forced itself into view. A child, Dominion-born, hiding in a ruined station. Draven had found her during a failed operation. She had no parents left, no colony to return to. She didn't cry. She simply asked, "Did we do something wrong?" Draven had no answer. So he left her. Alone. And now he understood why she didn't scream, why she didn't fear him. She had already met one of them. Back in the void, the scene faded. He stood before a mirror. Not metaphorical. A real mirror. It showed his face, aged, cracked, weary. Then the reflection moved differently. It smiled. Not cruelly, but with recognition. Then the mirror spoke in the passenger's voice. Empires fall because they forget what they truly are. You weren't the first. You won't be the last. But you may be the one who understands before the end. Draven stepped forward, touched the mirror, and it shattered, not into glass, but into stars. He found himself walking along a pathway made of light, not bright, not radiant, just soft and endless. Each step sent waves of memory into the space around him, his own thoughts, regrets, actions echoing outward like ripples on still water. Behind him, the echoes grew louder. He turned, saw others following, some dominion, some human, some neither, all reflections, all silent. He asked, "Where does this go?" A voice beside him now answered, "To the place beyond empire, the place beyond winning, the place beyond self." He turned to see the old man again, older now, wrinkled beyond recognition, eyes so deep they felt like tunnels through time. "Why are you always here?" Draven asked. The old man chuckled. "Because someone always has to be." The path ended at a cliff. Below it, darkness, not threatening, inviting, a sea of pure stillness, untouched and unmeasured. The old man gestured. "You can go back. Pretend this never happened. Forget what you've seen." Draven asked, "And if I don't?" The old man looked away. "Then you'll carry the burden. The one we carry. The one we pass on to those who finally see." Draven stared into the still sea. There were no ships, no stars, only understanding. He didn't step forward yet. He asked, "Will anyone believe me?" The old man shook his head. "They never do." Draven sat at the cliff's edge, felt the pull of memory, the exhaustion of knowing. And then something happened. The silence shifted. Not broken, but altered. Something new entered the stillness. Hope, not as salvation, not as victory, but as acknowledgement. A whisper that said, "You weren't alone in your failure." And somehow that was enough. Across what remained of the galaxy, a strange thing occurred. The human ships began to leave, one by one, quietly, without reason or farewell, no message, no announcement, just departure. Some drifted into black holes, some vanished in real time, like erasing chalk from a wall. Others simply turned and faded from radar as if they'd never existed. The Watchers were gone, because the watching was over. The Dominion had been seen, and the judgment had already passed. Not from humans, but from themselves. On a silent moon orbiting a forgotten world, a child wrote a story into the sand. She didn't know why. She'd never seen a Terran, never met a Dominion soldier. She was born after. Born in the afterworld, but something inside her remembered. And the story she wrote, without realizing, ended with the words, "We were not destroyed. We were understood. And we couldn't bear the weight of it." Draven didn't jump, didn't fall. He simply stood, turned, and walked back down the path, alone now. The old man was gone. The Watchers were gone. But the mirror? Still shattered, still floating. Each shard now glimmering with light from species not yet born, empires not yet built, because the lesson had been passed on, And that was humanity's final gift. Not conquest, not punishment, but reflection so deep it left scars. Draven woke on Earth, lying in the same ruined hospital where he'd slept before. His body ached. His mind felt hollow. But his eyes? Calm. And outside? In the street below, a boy passed him carrying a bucket of paint. He was painting something on the side of a building. Draven climbed down to see. The boy finished. It was a symbol. A simple one. An eye, open, still. The boy said nothing and left. And Draven, looking at the symbol, felt one truth settle in his chest. The calm wasn't terrifying because it meant power. It was terrifying because it meant truth. The city was still, not dead, not forgotten, just at peace in a way Draven had never experienced before. No patrols, no systems scanning the horizon, no hollow speeches playing on loop, no monuments to men who never bled. Just wind brushing through cracked windows, vines crawling across ancient concrete, and the distant sound of someone humming a tune without melody. It wasn't victory, it wasn't defeat, it was what came after. Draven sat beside the symbol the boy had painted. The eye, wide open, unblinking, was etched with a kind of permanence that no government edict or laser blast could erase. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was a memory, one humanity had carried first and now passed on. He ran his hand across the stone beneath it, the dust leaving marks on his fingers. He didn't wipe them off. He wanted to feel it, something real. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel the urge to report, to log, to analyze. There was no one left to impress, no one left to command. The Dominion was finished, not collapsed, not conquered, just done. The transmission towers still worked, though they buzzed with static. He activated one anyway. There wasn't anyone listening, but he spoke into it as if someone might stumble across the frequency years from now, maybe longer. His voice was rough, low, unscripted. This is Commander Ren Draven, former officer of the Krell Dominion, former servant of silence disguised as strength. If you're hearing this, you've either survived or you haven't realized you're gone yet. He paused, looked at the skyline. There's no war coming, no saviors, no demons. The humans were never here to fight. They didn't come to take anything. They came to make sure we saw ourselves. And we did. His fingers trembled on the console. We thought their stillness was weakness. We thought their silence was submission. But it was knowledge. A kind of knowledge that doesn't ask questions anymore because it's already buried the answers. Another pause. They weren't calm because they had nothing to fear. They were calm because they'd already feared everything and survived it. And when you survive that much, you stop raising your voice. He cut the transmission. Let the silence fill in the rest. Later, he walked the length of what once had been a military highway. Broken now, overtaken by trees growing through its cracks. He passed the old orbital lift, collapsed, twisted steel vines and shattered platforms. No signs of battle, just time. A girl sat near the wreckage, feet dangling over the edge of a broken stairwell. She wasn't human. Pale skin, dark, hollow eyes. Maybe one of the hybrids, maybe born after. No emblem. No uniform, no history. He nodded to her. She nodded back. That was it. No fear, no distrust, just a shared understanding neither could name. He slept that night beneath the remains of a shuttle station. No sirens, no alarms, just wind and stars. And dreams. Dreams not of war, not of the passenger, but of moments that never happened. Peaceful ones. A drink shared in a market square. A child pointing at stars, asking what each one was named. A voice in the dark saying, "We could have done it differently." In one of the city's deeper ruins, he found a message burned into an old wall. The letters were Terran. He traced them with his hand. The future does not belong to the loudest voice. Simple, but final. He stood there for a long time. In the following days, he started finding more people, wanderers, refugees, some human, some not. None of them talked about the past. None of them brought weapons. They sat together, sometimes by fire, sometimes by starlight, not as leaders or survivors, but just as witnesses. Everyone had seen something. Some had seen entire planets dissolve in panic. Some had seen a single human stare down a warship without blinking. Some had simply felt it. That pressure, that gaze that changed you. But all of them had one thing in common. They were still here. And they no longer asked why. The real change came slowly. One day, a child built a tower out of stone and wire. No one asked what it was for. Another drew on walls. A sun, a mountain, a figure with a hand over its chest. Art had returned, without permission, without purpose, and in that there was something new. Not rebuilding, not empire, just being. Draven sat at the edge of the city with an old data pad. He opened the last log he'd ever make. It wasn't for anyone but him. It's been 311 days since I first stepped on Earth. The human ships are gone, or they've become part of the stars. No new arrivals, no messages, just the quiet hum of what's left. The Dominion, if you're still out there somewhere, is over. And that's not a tragedy. That's the start of something else. He stopped writing, looked up. The sky was the same, but not. Different stars, different silence, a better kind. At night by a fire, someone asked him the question. Do you think the humans will ever come back? Draven thought for a long time. Then said, They never left. They just stopped needing to be seen. That was the last time anyone asked about them, not because they forgot, because the question had already been answered. Years passed. Cities became villages. Villages became whispers. Some left Earth, some stayed. But the story remained, not as fear, but as a reminder carved into the back of memory. The calm had come. It had judged. It had passed. And those who remained were no longer afraid of it. They understood it. They lived with it. And when one of them died, they were buried without monuments or names. Only a small mark above the grave. A circle. An open eye. A symbol of what had been witnessed. And what could not be forgotten. Draven died on the 1099th day. He died in his sleep. No one heard him leave. No one found a body, only a jacket folded on a chair near the coast, and a message etched into the stone beside it. Calm is terrifying not because it is quiet, but because it speaks when everything else has stopped making sense. And far above, orbiting a dead star in a system no longer mapped. A Terran ship still drifted, lights off, engines cold, inside, empty chairs, untouched consoles, a piano with one broken key, and on the wall, scratched with something far older than a blade. You are not the first, you are not the last, but now, you understand. They never feared Earth. Not at first. To the Galactic Council, Earth was a forgotten backwater, an unregistered Class 4 survival planet buried in the black between sectors, orbiting a dying star. The kind of place only smugglers or exiled biologists bothered logging. Primitive, unstable, dangerous only to itself. And they were right, until we found a way out. My name? Doesn't matter. No one says it anymore. The Council wiped it from the records when they erased the last diplomatic envoy. What matters is I was the first human they allowed to speak in the Grand Chamber of Unity. I remember walking through the doors, cold, golden arches that opened like they were afraid of what might pass through. I was alone, No escort, no weapons. Just me, a translator chip, and the truth. They didn't like what I had to say. The council was made up of 12 dominant species, each older than empires, with histories spanning tens of thousands of cycles. Their representatives sat on stone thrones like gods, looking down on everything. Each one of them was bioengineered for perfection, mentally linked, cold, and supposedly beyond fear. And yet, they shook. Not when I told them how Earth had survived 5 mass extinctions, not when I showed them the footage of the last war, not even when I explained how we learned to weaponize disease, mind, and radiation before we learned to cooperate. They only started shaking when I said the name, our real name, not humans, not Terrans, not Homo sapiens. That name came from before language, before structure, before even memory. The name buried in the blood, the one they had stripped from the records when their ancestors quarantined Earth and labeled it unstable origin. They thought we forgot. They were wrong. I stood in that chamber and whispered the word. I didn't speak it loud. I didn't have to. The AI recorders shut down. The translators went mute. One of the Avaxi delegates collapsed in convulsions. The air changed. You have to understand, these weren't weaklings. These weren't diplomats who'd never seen blood. These were species that had survived star-consuming wars, navigated black hole politics, bred entire subspecies for planetary combat. And they were afraid. I told them what it meant. I told them why we buried it. I told them why Earth had no allies. And then I told them the truth that cracked their silence. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a scar, a sealed wound in the flesh of the galaxy. We weren't exiled. We were locked away, because the last time we joined the stars, entire systems vanished. They thought it was myth, a story, until I spoke the name. And then one by one they remembered. Not as fact, not as logic, but as fear. Old, instinctual, genetic fear. The kind no evolution can erase. The kind that wakes species in the night and tells them to run before the fire finds them. One of them tried to speak, tried to say it was impossible, that humanity couldn't be the same species from the legends. That time, mutation and ruin had erased whatever horror we used to be. So I showed them. I took out the shard, a sliver of bone, carbon verified to be older than their sun, engraved with the name in our blood language, pulled from the skin of a fossilized alien ship they thought was destroyed during a cosmic storm. We weren't the storm. We were what came after. Now, the Council is in lockdown, communications blacked out, transit lines rerouted, entire sectors gone dark. They think they're containing it, but the name's already out, and Earth remembers. They called for silence. A level 0 emergency was declared across the inner sectors. That hadn't happened in 7 millennia. Not since the Necro Wars. Not since the Flesh Tide devoured an entire spiral arm of colonies in 6 cycles. Back then, the Council's response was swift, brutal, and united. This time, they were paralyzed. I stood in the center of the chamber, my hands still outstretched, the blood-etched shard cradled like a dead god's finger bone. They were afraid to breathe near it. Some of them couldn't look at it. Others whispered in languages their translators couldn't process. Throat clicks and subharmonic whines meant for war, not politics. And above all that noise, the silence of recognition loomed like a noose. The Avaxi representative, eldest among the council, covered in scaled gold and bred for logic, vomited a black fluid that steamed against the stone. The delegation of Skahern war priests hissed prayers in reverse tongues, praying not to gods, but to memories. I didn't move. No need. The shard did more talking than I ever could. "What is your demand?" a voice finally asked. It was not fear that spoke, not directly. The voice came from the Iller Prime, an entity that had merged with its own AI 6 centuries ago, turning itself into a hive thought meant to rule without emotion. Cold, calculated, unwavering. And yet, it trembled. I smiled. There is no demand. I came to deliver a truth. Whether you survive it is your choice. You threaten the council? Another barked. The Groth delegate, shaped like a boulder with legs, thumped his bio-hardened fists against the table. You speak poison and think we will bend. I stepped forward. Just once. That was enough. The Groth flinched. Good. You all thought Earth was gone, sealed, sanitized. You erased every trace of us from the unified memory core, destroyed every text that hinted at what we once were. I let my voice sharpen, bite. You didn't lock Earth away because we were dangerous. You buried us because we were better at it than you. You are primitives, the Groth spat, barely surviving your own planet. You scrape the stars with rusted claws and scream at the void like children. Exactly, I said, and we still terrify you. He went quiet. I turned to the room, rotating the shard between my fingers. You don't fear what we are. You fear what we become when we're cornered, when we're starved, betrayed, alone. One of the Iller drones hovered closer, its smooth metal body humming with data transfer. Your history was sealed under Directive 17, Cataclysmic Potential Life Forms. That designation carries extinction-level threat protocol. You should not even exist. Then maybe, I said softly, you should ask yourselves why we still do. The room fell still again. I walked back toward the center, boots echoing on polished obsidian. The chamber was vast, but now it felt like a tomb, and I was the only living thing inside. You all forgot what Earth's real name was, but it's carved into your species' instincts, even now. That tension in your bones, that sweat, that urge to run? I looked around the table. That's not fear, that's memory. The silence screamed. It was the Skarn who broke it next. A warrior species, claws for hands, blood sight in 3 spectrums, used in galactic wars as shock infantry. The one who spoke had ceremonial scars down his face, each one earned by battle. His voice was hoarse. It cannot be true. The tales were distorted. You cannot be those humans. That race was ended in the Pale Fire. The Pale Fire was your genocide attempt, I said, lifting the shard slightly. Didn't work. He recoiled. I stared at him. You burned our colonies, poisoned our atmospheres, dropped moons onto our cities. Then you erased the records and swore we never existed. He said nothing. I looked around again. And after all that, we still crawled back to the stars, with rusted metal, broken bones, and nothing but hatred in our lungs. The Iller AI clicked into a public transmission mode. I could feel it now. They weren't just afraid. They were verifying, digging into classified relics, cross-checking forgotten relics. Ancient runes found in crash sites they'd labeled as unreadable. And they were finding matches. They were finding us. I felt it in the air. The weight of confirmation, like watching a priest see his god bleed. I didn't wait for more permission. I walked to the center podium, pulled a strip of old leather from my coat, and unwrapped a flat metal disc. This, I said, was found in the corpse of a dead world in your forbidden zone. It's not alien, it's not natural, it's ours. And it's broadcasting still, on a loop, for anyone who remembers how to listen. I activated it. A faint, crackling voice emerged. Not alien, not advanced, just human. Male. He sounded tired, broken, angry. To anyone who finds this, know we tried. We tried to fit in. We tried to play nice. We tried peace, trade, alliance. They laughed, they lied, they killed. So now we don't try anymore. From this day on, Earth remembers. We remember everything. I looked up. This was recorded over 6,000 years ago. You tried to purge it. But memory doesn't die. It waits. The Groth delegate stood again. You think you can threaten the Council with stories and bones? You think we fear ghosts? No, I said, walking toward him now. You fear what created the ghosts. I was nose to chest with him. He towered over me. 4 meters tall, all muscle and fury. His species conquered 4 planets in a single generation. He couldn't even hold my gaze. I leaned in. We made genocide look like a mercy. He sat back down. I turned to leave. Transmission ends here. Earth will not contact the Council again. We will not sue for peace. We will not trade. We will not integrate. We've learned our lesson. The chamber buzzed with panic, some calling for emergency containment, others whispering demands for planetary lockdowns, species quarantines, preemptive strikes. I smiled. It was already too late. Check the outer rim, I said at the threshold. There are colonies, silent ones. No flags, no signals. But they're there. We returned to the stars a long time ago. You just didn't see us, because we didn't want you to. I paused. And tell your fleets this. If they so much as scan Earth's atmosphere again. I turned my head slightly, just enough so they could see my eyes. You won't have planets left to hide behind. Then I walked out. No guards stopped me, no weapons fired. They just let me go. Because for the first time in their long collective memory, the galaxy had remembered why it sealed Earth away. By the time I returned to the outpost on Foros 9, the Council had already broadcast their first lie. They called it a containment breach, claimed a rogue delegate had introduced dangerous misinformation into the central chambers, blamed a data virus, said nothing about Earth or the Shard or the name I spoke. But I didn't need to hear their lies to know they were afraid. Because ships had started vanishing, not theirs, ours. Silent ones, old models, steel and fire, not sleek composites and plasma sails. They were ghosts in the stars, ungoverned, unregistered, built from forgotten salvage and powered by will alone. The kind of ships that didn't announce themselves because they didn't care who heard the screams. The colonies were waking up. See, they never understood something about us. Not really. The Council assumed Earth was the source. That it all began there. That by isolating the planet, sterilizing its orbit, and enforcing a no-fly perimeter around Sol, they had put humanity in a cage. But they never looked deeper. They never asked the real question. What if Earth was the prison, and we were the ones locked out? I met with the others 2 nights after the chamber, in a rusted-out hull of an asteroid refinery orbiting nothing important. No names, no introductions. Just eyes that didn't blink enough and scars that hadn't been earned legally. These were not diplomats. They were remnants. Veterans. Exiles. Survivors of every silent war the Council refused to admit ever happened. Some still wore the old marks, unit brands scorched into their skin, now faded like myth. Others carried tokens, bone knives, data chips filled with war logs, pieces of broken ships that once flew under the banner of colonies no one had ever named aloud. They sat in silence as I placed the shard on the table. No one reached for it, but they all stared. I spoke the name, I said. The real one, in the grand chamber. A grunt, one of them, eyes milky and arms like steel cables, spat on the floor. How many of them pissed themselves? Most, I said. The others tried to act brave, but I saw it. Deep down, they knew. Another leaned forward. His voice was soft. But his hands kept twitching, like they were used to holding weapons, and didn't know what to do without them. So, what now? They come for us? No, I said. They're too scared. Then we hit 'em. I shook my head. We don't need to. That made them pause. I leaned in. Think. The Council spent centuries erasing us, hiding the truth. What happens now that the truth's bleeding through cracks in their history? What happens when every minor race, every fringe colony starts asking questions? You want them to tear the Council apart, one of them said, realization dawning. No, I replied. I want them to remember. A heavy silence. Not fear. Respect. We weren't generals. We weren't kings. We were something far worse. A story made real again. News started leaking across the mid-rings within weeks. First, it came in whispers. Fringe station crews talking about dark ships, docking without request, trading old tech, then vanishing. Mining colonies reporting anonymous support packets, food, fuel, even weapons, dropped from orbit, no sender ID. Then came the images, grainy surveillance footage, ships built like coffins with engines, all angles, no grace. Old-world human war designs, long thought destroyed in the Council's purge campaigns, but they were flying. One video surfaced from the Koresh line, a Council border station that went silent 3 days after sending the footage. It showed a single human ship, smaller than standard patrol class, taking on 6 Council scouts and walking away. Not flying, walking. The scouts were atomized in under 2 minutes. The human ship took 2 hits, then dropped a payload that didn't just destroy the station's power grid. It aged the metal, turned composite plating to rust in seconds, like time itself was the weapon. The Council tried to spin it as advanced rebel tech, but the name was already being whispered. Earth, not the humans, not the Terrans. Earth. That one word, like a curse. And that was when the real shift began. The Council sent agents, quiet ones, shadow class, meant to disappear into colonies and disappear people like me. Interrogation without questions, extraction without evidence. They didn't get far. One showed up in the Bastion markets on Nova Theris, tried to intercept a human cargo runner. Didn't even make it out of the docking tunnel. Security footage was wiped, but the station logs show someone spaced the entire deck with no authorization override. Another operative sent to Drellis Prime disappeared mid-transmission. His final report? Human outpost detected. Architecture ancient. No communication. All visible life signs non-standard. Species displays ritual scarring and archaic dialect. Recommend. Transmission lost. 3 hours later, Drellis Prime reported a cultural reclassification. Human ally. The Council tried to sanction the planet. The sanctioned ships never arrived. Black boxes found weeks later drifting in orbit. No survivors. You'd think we were planning something coordinated. A rebellion, a campaign. We weren't. There was no central command, no EarthGov, no human empire. That wasn't us anymore. We were shards, broken, spread across space like shrapnel. And that was the beauty of it. You can kill a government. You can crush an army. But you can't kill a species that's already buried itself in the dark. We weren't coming back. We never left. I got contacted by someone I hadn't heard from in years. He called himself just the Operator. Used to run blackout channels during the Council's species purity purge. He'd helped smuggle human children off condemned worlds. Half of them didn't survive. Now? He was smiling. Thought you were dead, he said, voice crackling through layers of interference. I shrugged. Felt like it for a while. You know what you've done? He asked. I nodded. Told the truth. Nah, he said. You lit the match. Now the whole goddamn galaxy smells smoke. 3 days later, I received an encrypted packet. No sender, just a name burned into the metadata. Echo Black. It was a list. 1,768 planets. Every world where human life had been recorded, then erased. Some had been bombed. some sterilized, some just vanished. The list didn't just include names, it had coordinates, survivors, active reconstructions, tribes, clans, hybrid offshoots, entire micro-civilizations built underground, underwater, even in vacuum. Earth didn't send this. It couldn't. We did. All of us, scattered, forgotten, and now connected, not with a network, with a name. And that was all we ever needed. Now the Council's breaking. One species at a time. Some try to ally with us, send envoys, open communications, offer reparations. We don't respond. Others declare us terrorists, war criminals. We don't care. Because while they debate, we build, not fleets, not colonies, memory. We build shrines in orbit of forgotten war zones. We teach children the old dialects, the ones whispered in dying bunkers and backwater slave camps. We burn history books that left us out. And we remember, because that's the one thing the Council never understood. The truth they can't erase. We don't survive because we're strong. We survive because we remember what made us monsters. And when the stars forget us again, we'll remind them. They called it a dead system. No orbiting suns, no light, no warmth. Just radiation, frozen asteroids, and a thick belt of metallic debris circling where a star used to be. The Council marked it unsuitable for life centuries ago, choked with electromagnetic static and gravitational fractures that tore standard ships apart. But that was the point, because Echo Black was never meant for comfort. It was a tomb. And like all good tombs, it was built for the living things that never wanted to be found. He was born without a name, just a number. 86-1K, a male, early 30s, skin marked with deliberate scarring, ritualistic burns in the shape of pre-fall sigils, long forgotten by civilized species. His lungs had been rebuilt twice due to exposure, and his left eye was mechanical, torn out during a hunt. He had no rank, no home, no luxury, only purpose. Watch, wait, survive, and if necessary, remind the stars who we are. The colony wasn't built underground. That would have made too much sense. No, Echo Black was suspended, floating inside the fragmented gravity well of a collapsed star. Hundreds of kilometers wide, the debris field pulsed like a dying heart, shredding the laws of physics just enough to confuse any long-range scans. The station itself was pieced together from ancient war wreckage, black iron bones lashed with heat-tempered carbon. Everything creaked. Everything was cold. And every single one of them liked it that way, because comfort made you weak. And out here, weakness didn't get a second chance. 86-1K stood in the observation chamber, a narrow dome of reinforced glass staring into the void. Beyond it, pieces of old warships drifted like ghosts. An ancient council dreadnought, its insignia half erased, spun slowly with puncture holes clean through its hull. A message, maybe. A warning. He didn't care. He wasn't raised to wonder. He was raised to remember. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Precise, unapologetic. Another watcher stepped beside him, a woman older than she looked. Her face was lined with frost burns. Her voice was rough and short. "They've broken containment." He didn't ask who. She continued. "Council's lying to their own now, classifying events as myth reemergence incidents." She snorted. "They're calling us a cultural infection." He blinked once. "We're not culture." She grinned. "Damn right." A pause. Then she said, "One of the colonies transmitted the word." His mechanical eye flickered. "The name?" She nodded. "Full signal burst in 6 dialects." The weight of that settled over them like ash. Once, long ago, saying the name would have been suicide, a kill switch. Anyone speaking it within council territory was erased, along with whatever planet they stood on. But now, the signal was spreading, and with it, so was the fear. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the fractures had begun. Council representatives were abandoning their posts. Civilian planets were refusing scans. Some species, older than Earth's own myths, were turning inward, locking down systems, severing connections, afraid to even say the word human aloud. In the dead spaces between systems, echo ships were appearing, not as fleets, but as ghosts. They didn't fly in formation. They didn't broadcast identity. They didn't ask questions. They just arrived, reminded someone of something ancient, then left. Sometimes things disappeared after they left. Stations, fleets, whole species lines. And nobody knew if it was them, or if the galaxy was simply tearing itself apart under the weight of the truth. Back on Echo Black, 86-1K entered the Hall of Bones. It wasn't ceremonial. There were no flags, no hymns, no polished steel, just remains, hung on chains, skulls, armor, burned helmets, pieces of ancient enemy ships welded into the wall like scars, each one a memory, each one a lesson. Some were council, some were ours. It didn't matter. They were all here for the same reason. We don't forget. An old man waited at the center of the chamber. His hands were missing, replaced by blunt metal prosthetics he never bothered upgrading. He had no eyes, just scar tissue, and 2 tattooed red lines where sockets used to be. He didn't turn when 86-1K entered. "They finally heard it?" he asked. "They heard it." A long breath. "And the council?" "Cracking, not breaking. Not yet." The old man smiled. "They always crack first. They just don't know they're already broken." Outside the station, the static field began to pulse. An object was entering the dead system. Unregistered, unidentified, no beacon, no code. But it wasn't one of theirs. It was too clean, too quiet, too confident. Council. 86-1K was already in the control chamber by the time it crossed the debris field. The AI grid lit up with readings, heat signatures, shield patterns, pulse frequencies. They hadn't changed, still using the same tracking systems, the same arrogance. He leaned forward. The screen showed a sleek Obsidian-class probe vessel. It was scanning with light pulses, slow, cautious, not meant to provoke. Just observe. That was worse, because it meant they were hunting for truth. Quietly, hoping to confirm Earth's return without setting off alarms. He tapped the comm. "Permission to engage." The voice that answered came from deep in the system, old, metallic, male. "Use the memory protocol." 86-1K nodded. "Understood." He keyed in a sequence. Outside, a ship emerged from the debris field. Not new, not beautiful, just human. It was shaped like a coffin with engines. Thick armor, unpainted, covered in the markings of the old wars. Every scar was visible, laser burns, kinetic strikes, even hand-etched names of the dead. It didn't announce itself. It didn't warn. It just powered weapons and transmitted a file. Audio, one word, the name, spoken in the ancient dialect. The sound alone was enough to spike energy readings. Council sensors scrambled, targeting systems blinked out, communications overloaded, and then came the shot. A single bolt. Not plasma, not rail, something older. It ripped through the probe, ignored its shields, and embedded itself in its core. The probe drifted. Lights flickered. Engines sputtered. But it wasn't destroyed. Not yet. Because the file kept playing. Again, and again, and again. One word. The name. Until the ship's AI, unable to override, sent the probe into self-destruct. Back inside, 86-1K watched it happen with no expression. He turned to the old man. "That'll get their attention." The old man nodded. "Good. Let them remember the fear before the fire starts." A beat passed. Do we respond if they send more? 86 1K cracked his neck. No, we don't respond. Why? Because we're not here to be understood. We're here to be remembered. The Council now knew. Earth wasn't just a backwater planet. It wasn't just a species. It wasn't even a threat. It was a wound, still bleeding, still alive, and no longer hidden. They convened in silence. 12 species, 12 thrones, 12 minds engineered for dominance, diplomacy, war, and legacy. For over 9,000 cycles, the Galactic Council had ruled the known galaxy with stability enforced by terror and a peace sustained by forgetting. But now they remembered, and it was tearing them apart. The chamber was no longer a symbol of unity. It was a tomb of paranoia, filled with delegates speaking over one another, voices cracked with fear. The footage from the dead system had leaked. The name had been heard. The probe had self-destructed. And something had answered from the dark. The Iller AI spoke first. Its voice was artificial, static bent. We face existential contamination. This is no longer a containment issue. The name is loose in galactic networks. Memetic infection has begun across 3 sectors. Another delegate, cloaked in psionic shielding, growled from its seat. They've built a mythology around their pain, and now it spreads like fire through dry air. A third hissed. We should have finished the pale fire. That stopped the room cold. Everyone turned. The Avaxi representative, the one who had once led the Purge Accord against humanity, leaned forward, his golden scales dim with age. You think we didn't try? We scorched every trace of their empire from the stars. We used viral bombs, gravity fractures, even soul burners in the outer colonies. Nothing worked. They hid, the Groth delegate spat. Like insects. No, the Avaxi said slowly. They waited. In a chamber beneath the main archives, sealed under a Level 0 classified order, a young council aide stood before a vault that hadn't been opened in 5,000 years. The file was labeled simply, Operation Silent Ash. He had no clearance. But like many young minds across the galaxy now whispering Earth's name in private, curiosity outweighed fear. The lock was organic, bio-encrypted. A heartbeat recognition system keyed only to the former executioner of Earth himself. But Earth had taught the galaxy one lesson above all. If you can bleed, you can be copied. The boy hacked it, and the vault screamed as it opened. Inside was the truth. Operation Silent Ash had not been the end of Earth. It had been the beginning of something worse. The file detailed the actual result of the Pale Fire, the war the Council believed had annihilated humanity. It hadn't. They'd burned Earth's cities, yes. They'd broken its skies. They'd turned continents into wastelands and seas into poison. But Earth did not die. It adapted. The footage was old, corroded. But it was real. Human children scavenging radioactive ruins. Soldiers carving weapons out of crashed enemy craft. An entire generation raised with no sky, no food, no hope, and still training. Males forced to drink irradiated blood to develop internal resistance to Council bioweapons. Females giving birth inside lead bunkers, singing lullabies over Geiger counters. And then, the cities began to rise again. Not out of ambition, out of spite. The Council didn't destroy a species. They created a species that couldn't die. The aide stood frozen, not by horror, by envy. Because as his own species stagnated under the Council's peace, Earth had done something no one else dared. It had evolved through agony. And now, they were back. The data didn't just stay with the boy. Within hours, the archive was copied 117,000 times. By morning, it was streaming across secret channels. By noon, half the galaxy had seen Earth's rebirth. By night, 2 Council protectorates declared independence. In the main chamber, the Council's fear had turned into desperation. "We must strike," one delegate snapped. "Not just Earth, all colonies. Every human trace must be purged. This time, we use the void drainers. No half measures." But someone else spoke, quietly, from the back of the chamber. Not a voice that often spoke. The Dravani Primarch, leader of a species that spoke only in genetic pulses, had ruled the psychic quadrant for millennia, and hadn't known war in over 6,000 cycles. "Do you not feel it?" the Dravani whispered. "In your marrow? In your ancestral bones?" The others went silent. "They are not rising because they want revenge," he said. "They are rising because we gave them purpose. And there is nothing in this galaxy more dangerous than a species that no longer wants to live, only to remember." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Echo Black's colonies activated. Not in unison, not as an army, but as a memory. One colony, the Shatterpoint Bastion in the Null Rift, released a signal, not words, not demands, just audio. "We remember the skies set on fire. We remember the children coughing blood in silence. We remember the sound of our last city falling. And now, you will." That was all. The message looped, played across council comms, played in luxury towers, played in orphanage servers, played in deep space where no one should have been listening. And still, it played. Back in Echo Black, 86-1K sat in the war chamber, his hands folded. Before him, holographic screens showed dozens of systems lighting up. Human outposts, once dark, now broadcasting the old dialect. The real name wasn't just being heard anymore, it was being taught. Even to species that weren't human, especially them. One screen showed a group of sentient Arixi, once loyal council foot soldiers, carving human sigils into the walls of their hive temple. They didn't understand the full meaning, but they understood the fear it caused in their masters. Another screen showed a slave-bred species on council agricultural worlds painting Earth's flag, long banned, forgotten, onto council supply crates. Not because they were loyal to Earth, but because the council was more afraid of that symbol than anything else. That kind of power? You don't earn it with lasers. You earn it with blood. A transmission came through, not from an echo colony, from Earth, real Earth, the planet itself. It wasn't supposed to be possible. Seoul was locked behind 24 layers of council restrictions. Observation was limited. No verified surface contact had occurred.